We are on to week 4 in the NFL after a wild week 3. And I feel like this is a great time to remind everybody one of the best aspects of DFS. You get to start over. It's like a blank slate. That was almost a Taylor Swift reference, which is apparently all the rage in the NFL right now. But if that means more Swifties are watching our show, welcome. Let's write some names. Welcome to the DFS Academy. I am your host, Ryan Weisse, and we are here to help you build some cash and GPP DFS lineups. With me, as always, Austin and Kelly. Kelly handles the GPP big tournament lineups for us. How are you this evening?
Super lovely.
Yeah, ready for a great recording in the middle of the game on a Thursday night. So we're going to have no idea what's going on other than the Packers being absolute trash. They're going to fix it, right, Austin? It's going to be garbage time second half. We're going to see good Jordan Love, right?
Yeah, we're going to come back and we'll witness the greatest comeback in NFL history once more, you know.
I certainly am going to need that for my fantasy lineups for the fact that I was out here telling everybody to listen and start Jordan Love this week. Kelly just straight up called that a trash take before the show, said that she never expected any good out of Jordan Love. By the way, Austin covers our cash lineups. He writes a great article about it every week. Austin, how you doing this evening?
Doing great. You know, the great thing about me covering only Sunday is there's so many games happening that if I get one pick wrong, like nobody's paying attention to it. They're paying attention to like Davante and getting 50 yards, whereas you get the liberty of, you know, everybody's paying attention to how your Jordan Love pick is playing out right now.
Yeah, Thursday night. And Luke Musgrave is my stream of the week tight end, Kelly. So you would just tell me that was just I stacked the wrong people here, right?
Yeah.
Garbage time still counts. I am very, very hopeful. Folks, this is the DFS Academy. As mentioned, we are going to help you with cash and GPP lineups. I want to remind everyone, we don't just talk DFS. We put a very small amount of money where our mouths are. We have $2 contests on DraftKings and FanDuel. You will find the invites to those contests in the description of this video and also in Austin's article tomorrow and Kelly's recap article on Saturday. Basically, if it's about DFS and it's about Club Fantasy, you're going to find links to join those contests. We almost basically filled those up last week for the first time this season. And as more and more people start to join and we fill them up every week, we're going to make them larger. So just make sure you get in there. Like I said, it's a nice little time. And if you win those contests, you get to hear your name at the end of our show, which is going to be one person because he took down both contests this week. Speaking of last week, we have answers to the test. This is last week's Slate Breaker Millionaire lineup. I actually looked at this lineup and was pleasantly surprised with how well Club Fantasy did with this lineup. Jared Goff was my stream of the week quarterback. Kenneth Walker, I predicted accurately that would score 2 touchdowns. I'm almost positive we mentioned Mostert on the show. We always talk about Tyreek Hill. We love Keenan Allen on this show. Tank Dell, we've been talking up for weeks. Sam Laporta is Kelly's guy. Adam Thielen, I don't think we fit into the show, but you both were on Buffalo's defense. Another great call by Kelly. You guys did great with this. So, Kelly, looking at that lineup, do you have any major takeaways?
I don't know. I feel so on the spot. No, when I look at it, I see a lot of familiarity throughout our articles. So that made me feel super good. And while we were watching the games on Sunday and seeing all of this roll out and chatting in the chat, it's like, heck yeah. I almost dropped an F-bomb. I don't know if I should or not, but that's how I felt.
I'm pretty sure I've done so on the show already, but you have a much better image to uphold than I do. I look like this. I'm allowed to say whatever I want. Nobody expects anything of me. Austin, you had some interesting takeaways, and I'm very interested in your very first takeaway.
Yeah, I mean, first off, when I found this lineup, I noticed only 2 players on this whole team are rostered under 10%, which is mind-blowing to me. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about this is like, this is not normal, right? Last week was not normal for DFS. And to speak more to that,
football.
Yeah,
it was a weird week.
That's true. It's not often that team scores 70 points. And it's also not often that the winning Millionaire Maker lineup is 294 points. Like, that just tells you how bonkers this week was. And so this was just a week where like the chalk hit. And if you weren't in on these players, you were buried. I was looking at this lineup, I was like, there's nothing about this to me that says unique, that says like contrarian, right? Except for maybe Jared Goff, maybe. I guess Adam Thielen, but like outside of that, I was kind of like, this feels pretty.
But what's interesting is when you went and looked at those two players' matchups, they told a story of a good game. So they were only contrarian because people wanted better names in their lineup, not necessarily better matchups.
I will say, and I'm probably going to, I'm just going to ride this into the ground. Sam Laporta still was super, I would say, disrespected, but he hasn't been here long enough to necessarily earn all of our respect. But such a low ownership. That is one of those two players under 10% rostership in the last week. And that's why it's an extremely great play. And it has been again this night on Thursday. If you
already out here eating as Detroit's carving up the Green Bay Packers. We're recording this as the game's going into the second quarter. So if anything great happens after halftime, we likely won't be reacting to that. Our first category is called top of the class. These are the expensive players. These are the players we are targeting in cash and tournaments. Austin, go for it, buddy.
Yeah, so I've got one this week. We've got Davante Adams. He's $8K on DraftKings and only $8,100 on FanDuel, which that price difference is very surprising to me. Yeah. The fact that it's that close across the two platforms. First off here, the Los Angeles Chargers, their defense just hasn't quite gotten there yet. I do think Brandon Staley is going to get it sorted out, but he hasn't proven it yet this season. They've been giving up the most yards to the receiver position through the first 3 weeks of the season. And Davante Adams is coming off of a 20 target week, which is absolutely mind blowing. Like, we had multiple receivers getting 20 targets last week. I don't understand what is happening in the NFL where defenses are like, yeah, sure, you just target the same receiver all game. We're good with that. That's fine. Like, apparently that's the trend now.
I'll say it worked out well for both. The Chargers won or lost. I can't remember now.
They won.
The Chargers won. So it worked out well for the Chargers, didn't work out well for the Raiders.
Yeah. So, but he probably doesn't get 20 targets again. But even if he gets 10 targets, right, like Davante Adams can easily 3x his salary on 10 targets. So I feel good about the matchup and the usage. I will say, if we don't have Jimmy Garoppolo starting at quarterback, I probably pivot off of Davante Adams and pay up elsewhere. Probably will look more at a Christian McCaffrey pay up at running back situation in that case. So just keep an eye on that. But if Garoppolo starts, I'm playing Adams.
You rank IDP players for us here at Club Fantasy. JC Jackson, who they spent a ton of money on in Los Angeles, was a healthy scratch last week. Is that a lesson learned and we should expect him back? Does it really even matter with Davante Adams?
Yeah, I don't think it really matters with Davante Adams, honestly, but it is something if you're playing ADP to keep an eye on. And there will be weeks where I think it does matter, right? When you have someone who isn't quite the stature of Davante Adams and not getting the target share that he is. But yeah, interesting situation there with JC Jackson. We'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, Austin might only had one guy, but Kelly, you went all in, and you went all in with probably the most popular stack in the entire world right now. But sometimes I feel like when we get to this point in the season, being popular ends up being the contrarian move when it comes to these big tournaments because people scare themselves off of these guys.
It can be, yeah, for sure. I think that's the case with Justin Herbert this week. 7.8K on DraftKings, 8.6K on FanDuel. I feel like it's still a manageable salary, but it's creeping up there. But he is both sexy and dependable, is my notes.
I was going to say, if you didn't read your notes, I was going to be so disappointed.
He's averaging over 26 fantasy points per game. Fun fact, though, I heard this happened to be because the O-line just really isn't doing a great job protecting him. So he's throwing the ball a lot of passes, frequent passes happening. So why don't we just take advantage of that?
Yeah.
Stack it right up with friend of the show.
Yes.
Allen. I have Keenan Allen and Davante Adams on the same tier this week. I mean, they're same 20
targets.
Same targets, same rostership, which happens to be over 20%. However, you can differentiate yourself elsewhere in your GPP lineups. I think this is not to be overlooked because they're both projected for 18 plus points and they're both facing really stinky, terrible defenses. So they're great matchups, I think. In this case, I love the Herbert Keenan Allen stack. If you can happen to squeeze Davante Adams in there, who knows?
So you mentioned same salary. And while that holds true on DraftKings, that does not hold true on
Okay,
FanDuel.
you're right. On FanDuel.
No. I'm not calling you out. I want to ask you about it. Hold on. So 9,500 for Keenan Allen. These are Christian McCaffrey prices. And I understand my guy has set the world on fire. That was a tough pill for me to swallow. So here's my question. Is he appropriately priced and Davante Adams is a value, or has FanDuel lost their minds on Keenan Allen?
I feel like that is a bit wild. I'm glad that you called that out. I meant to chime in when Austin mentioned there's only $100 difference in the two salaries for Davante Adams. Normally we see anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000 difference between the platforms. So when I see odd math like that, it makes me feel like, well, we've been talking about girl math. It makes me feel intuitive. I like the Davante Adams play better, but I love the stack that we're getting with Allen. So that price point, while it is scary, I don't think I'd play it on FanDuel. I've been playing with it on DraftKings, which we're going to talk later. So in the case of FanDuel, I would go Davante Adams.
Perfect. I want to point out that I had never heard the term girl math until you brought it up on our show. And now I see it just everywhere. And so completely off topic. But the best post I saw was about boy math. And it was making fun of the overlord Elon Musk. And it said boy math is spending $44 billion on a $25 billion company and then magically making it worth $8 billion. Like, yes, that is an accurate description. So we'll steer clear of the politics. I just thought that was absolutely hilarious. Next category, band nerds. These are the ones that spend a little bit too much time practicing their instrument, so they're never going to quite reach the top of the class. $6,000 to $8,000 players in cash and tournaments, and I like to flip it up, so I'm going to let Kelly go first this time.
All right. Well, now I've got another QB for you who's not sexy, but still very dependable.
Yes.
Kirk Cousins, 7.1 on DraftKings, 7.9 on FanDuel. So manageable. And how do we turn down 28 fantasy points per game average? Love it. Love it. Love it. So consistent. I know they're facing a bit tougher defense, but he's just Mr. Dependable. I like it a lot.
It seems like they're going to be happy to throw the ball 40 to 50 times every single game this season.
That's what it feels like. And I in a write-up I had, it's Kirk Cousins and Justin Herbert kind of a side by side. And again, it's kind of that same, you know, they're doing a lot of the same things. You could play either one and get away with it. Kirk Cousins is a heck of a lot less expensive. So there's that.
I feel like every week I'm choosing between those two. If I go back and look at our lineups in the Club Fantasy Contest, I guarantee it's one of those two.
Well, then we have what probably seems obvious, but somehow still feels like a trick.
Yeah.
Raheem Mostert. Why is he 6.5 on DraftKings? He's 7.9 on FanDuel, which is still manageable with the FanDuel salary cap being higher. And it just feels kind of tricky, but I'm all in on it. It's a low rostership, which is great for our GPP games, in my opinion, especially on a player that scores like this. Just 5% of managers are in on DraftKings, 1% of managers in on FanDuel. And I think it's because they're not quite sure how to fit that higher salary in with some of their other receivers. But to me, it still feels manageable. I also think the Bills' defense is scaring people away.
And I feel like that's something we need to kind of re-examine, because Bills' defense against running backs has been middle of the road this season so far. Are you nervous that, I want to get his name right, is it Devon Achane now? Are we nervous he's going to start taking more and more of the run, or is this still Mostert's backfield for the foreseeable future?
I'm not going to be nervous until I see a big impact, because right now it still feels a bit of a hype train. So,
and that's fair. Austin, you're keeping it quiet again this week. Just one single player out of this category.
Yeah, I'll start with the player I have is Joe Burrow. I mean, he's 6,500 on DraftKings, he's 7,200 on FanDuel. He hasn't really like hit the Joe Burrow like all capital letters that we know so far, and so his pricing is staying down, which I love. But have I told you enough about the Titans' pass funnel defense this year? Because if not, like you're going to get sick of it at some point. Last week I said if Deshaun Watson was able to do well against the Titans, then you're just rolling out every quarterback against them. Well, it happened.
You're rolling out every quarterback.
It's time to roll out every quarterback. I think this is a great opportunity for Joe Burrow to have a bounce back week. The Tennessee Titans have given up an average of 300 yards a game to opposing quarterbacks. If Joe Burrow is able to hit that mark, that's starting out at 15 points on DraftKings right there. He needs 1 or 2 touchdowns more to do just fine for your salary on DraftKings. So I feel great about it. And yeah, I'm only got one player in this category this week. I will say, if you're playing Joe Burrow, you might as well play Jamar Chase. But the other thing about me only having Joe Burrow in this category is it's kind of, I don't love a lot of these mid-tier options this week. So I'm taking kind of a stars and scrubs approach where I'm paying up for guys like Christian McCaffrey, Davante Adams, Jamar Chase. He's a little bit up there. He's in the 78K range. And then there's a lot of players in that 5K range and even a couple in the 4K range that I feel comfortable with on DraftKings. So I didn't have enough in the band nerds category that I felt great about. So I just stuck with one for the week.
One thing I noticed, you guys have already hit on 3 quarterbacks, and they are all kind of like bigger name quarterbacks. And one thing I noticed when I was writing the matchup report this week is the quarterbacks with the good matchups suck, plain and simple. The names we're looking at are Jimmy Garoppolo, Justin Fields, Matthew Stafford, the Carolina quarterback, whoever it might be, Russell Wilson, Brock Purdy. These are not the names that anybody wants to start. So I find it interesting that both of you are going with more the household names. With bad quarterbacks having good matchups, Kelly, does that give you a leeway? Is this a week where you might build a lot of GPP lineups around any of these bad quarterbacks? Or are they just not even worth the risk? You just feel like you're flushing money at that point.
Yeah, no, I think I will say CJ Stroud might be a quarterback I'd throw a dart with. Other than that, I wasn't looking at anybody else. And the only reason I thought about CJ Stroud was, again, he's averaging 19 fantasy points per game, which is nothing to sneeze at. He could be worth the risk. He's got 2 good performances in a row, but I don't really like too many this week.
It makes a lot of sense. And going back to your Joe Burrow pick, Austin, I find it interesting. So I've been talking to Rachel, great friend of the show, Tootsie Pop, because like I often talk about on the show, I'm not good at DFS, but honestly, sitting with you guys, I've gotten better. And she noticed that I've like placed in all of the tournaments. And my biggest takeaway, and this sounds so elementary, but the best advice I can give is go back and look at your lineups and make sure your lineup tells the story. But my biggest takeaway is play it safe and play for ceiling. And so Joe Burrow is an interesting option to me, Austin, because safe was what we saw from him last year, but it hasn't been that way this year, to where he almost feels like a contrarian play. And that's something you need to stay away from in cash. Are you just betting? I know we talked about the defense, but are you just betting that Joe Burrow is just going to finally show up one of these weeks, and then at that point he'll be good?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of it, right? Like he has enough of a track record that I feel good about him. And like, yeah, it hasn't been pretty. Last week he scored 9.2 fantasy points. I don't really know what was up with them going up against the LA Rams, other than all of a sudden the Rams were like, yeah, we can put pressure on the quarterback. But the week before that, he put up 16 points. And 16 points, I feel fine with. Like, it's not great, but it's not going to sink my cash lineup, right? Like this week, it would have, right? This last week was an outlier, right? I scored 160 points in cash on DraftKings, and I only cashed in 2 of my 6 lineups.
Yeah.
Like, that's not great, right? Whereas the week before, I had like 130, I think, 135, and I cashed in all of them. So it just depends on the week. And this could be a week where things are typical. 135, 140 points on DraftKings get you all you need. And if Joe Burrow gets 16 points, that's fine. And he's cheap enough that I can go elsewhere.
I think it's a really good point. Go ahead.
I could see going for like an Andy Dalton or a CJ Stroud in cash, but it just depends. I prefer to go after rushing quarterbacks that are that cheap more than these kind of like meh passing quarterbacks.
Yeah, I figured we wouldn't look at any of these bad quarterbacks in cash. It's just Burrow's so interesting to me because you just don't know what you're going to get at this point. But you hit a really good point. Bad Joe Burrow for everyday fantasy for cash games is still good enough, if you will, as long as you pop at Keenan Allen every single week. Next category is going to be the bookworms. These are easily estimated, but watch out. They can be sharp. These are $4,000 to $6,000 players. This could end up being the bulk of your lineup. And this is kind of what Austin was talking about with stars and scrubs. You're going to probably have a lot more players in this category. So Austin, go ahead and get us started.
Yeah. So once again, I don't give all of my players on the podcast. So if you want some more mid-tier players like this, I have a lot in my cash article that'll be posting on Friday. But first, we're going to start with a podcast exclusive pick. Again, that's why you watch the DFS Academy. And we're starting with Josh Palmer, who is 4K on DraftKings. I don't know how. Like DraftKings, y'all knew. Y'all knew something was happening, but you just left it at 4K. And then FanDuel, he's at 6,100. The argument is simple here. He's now the wide receiver 2 in that offense. They're passing the ball a ton. Herbert's playing at an MVP level, and it's just he's 4K on DraftKings. Like I can do so much more with the rest of my salary if I'm getting Josh Palmer in my lineup. And so like even if he just gets 10 fantasy points, that's fine. That's all I really need, especially because I'm going to get to pay Christian McCaffrey or Davante Adams if I have Josh Palmer. And I'm in on those guys this week, so I'm happy to do it.
So I want to ask a quick question about that because this is something that I always tend to do. How deep will you go out of a single offense? If I love Herbert and I clearly love Keenan Allen, in a cash game, is it okay to go 3 deep and throw Josh Palmer in a Keenan Allen, Justin Herbert lineup?
That makes me nervous because then you're putting like all of your if you're putting all of your eggs in one basket, and like if that game fails, then your cash lineup fails.
Very true, but according to Kelly, it's a sexy basket, so I'm okay with it.
It is a sexy basket. It scares me. It's
Okay.
not how I play, but like I think you can get away with it in the right situation, right? Like I think the Chargers offense is a good example. Frankly, I think the Bengals offense is a good example this week. Like go Burrow, Chase, and Tyler Boyd. Like I could see the 3 of them hitting on their cash lineup. It's just me like mentally when I start getting 3 players from the same team in my lineup, I start to feel nervous because part of it too depends on the website. If you're on DraftKings, I feel more comfortable with it. If you're on
that's
FanDuel,
kind of where I'm at. Yeah.
yeah. If you're on FanDuel, it's less comfortable because Keenan Allen and Josh Palmer, for the example you gave, they're competing for touchdowns.
Yeah, and that's what is that, 15,600. So that's like a fourth of your salary.
Exactly. So it depends a little bit on the site context. It depends on the game context as well. I could see an argument for it, but I'm usually avoiding it.
Okay.
So next I have Adam Thielen, another kind of weird gross pick, but he's getting the targets. He's 4,500 on DraftKings.
It's like the wide receiver 9 in fantasy football, and you just called him gross.
Well, nobody wanted him at the beginning of the year. He was like the wide receiver 50 by ADP. Yeah. It's the weirdest thing ever that now he's like, oh, Adam Thielen. I like that guy. Like funny, good receivers stay good even when they go to new places, but whatever. We seem to not learn our lessons there. He's 6,800 on FanDuel. He's averaged 11.5 targets over the past 2 weeks, which is insane volume. Like for a player that is 4.5K on DraftKings, 11.5 targets averaging 11.5 targets over 2 weeks is just wild. And the Vikings, they're giving up the 3rd most points to receivers, and Carolina are underdogs. I will say, I can see this going sideways if the Vikings blitz the heck out of the Carolina Panthers and that offensive line just falls apart. There is a pathway where this goes poorly, but I think Thielen is getting enough targets that it'll be fine.
I'm going to stop you before going to your next player because you guys have it in common and we haven't heard Kelly's voice in a while. I do want to say that you both just disappoint me because I hate this player so much, and to see him on both of your list just breaks my heart. So I'm going to let you guys try to convince me. I don't think you can do it. However, the matchup makes sense. Kelly, talk to us about your players.
Well, if you're going to play not so sexy but dependable Cousins. I actually think I may try and stack this week. I like to go with a wide receiver typically, but at 5.8K on DraftKings and 7.2 on FanDuel, it's super hard to stay away from Alexander Mattison, not to be confused with Mattison. He's averaging 16 touches per game with Kirk Cousins, and his snap count has gone up week over week to where he's now playing well over 80% of the snaps. So that is why I'm in on Alexander Mattison.
The Vikings are clearly trying to form my most hated backfield ever because I've never been a Cam Akers fan. And Austin, I'm going to let you talk, and I know you're going to talk about the matchup. And I understand it's a great matchup. It's a matchup I've been picking on this entire season because they just give up touchdowns to running backs. I don't see Mattison. Basically what I'm trying to say is I wouldn't be surprised if Cam Akers comes in and steals these, but you guys are really liking what you're seeing from Mattison right now, based on the touches in the matchup, Austin.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I'm at. I don't think Cam Akers is coming in. I mean, I don't even know. It was so inconsequential of a draft pick that I can't even remember what the draft compensation was.
I think it was like a 6th round swap in 2 years or something.
Yeah,
like that.
That's so gross. Here's the thing. I'm not playing Mattison on DraftKings. I'm just going to throw that out there right off the bat because I don't think he's getting enough pass catching volume to really warrant it. I think it's maybe fine on DraftKings for cash, but I actually prefer him on FanDuel because of Ryan, exactly what you just said, like the touchdowns. I need touchdowns on FanDuel. That's how you're going to cash. I think Alexander Mattison can fall into the end zone at least once, maybe twice. The Vikings are 4.5 point favorites. They need to get this run game figured out. What is a better time to get their run game right against the Carolina Panthers, who are giving up the 3rd most points to running backs? I think this is an okay week for Alexander Mattison. I don't need him to do I don't need him to be Dalvin Cook. Everybody wanted him to be Dalvin Cook. I don't need him to be Dalvin Cook. I need him to be
Alexander
Cam Akers. Yeah, exactly. And if he gets in the end zone, I feel pretty good. Maybe he does it twice and then we're great.
They've allowed multi-touchdowns to every team they faced this season on the ground. So I get it. And Kelly, this might be a first for the DFS Academy. A positive Arizona Cardinals mention before a negative Arizona Cardinals mention.
Holy cow.
We did it. We have turned a page and opened our eyes to Arizona's not that bad.
No, I actually specifically I thought about picking a player against Carolina or the Cardinals this week, and I was like, I'm going to lay off for 1 week. It hasn't been looking too great.
Yeah, it really has not. We've kind of looked silly, and Kelly's got a nice little smile about it. So.
It's exactly why I was telling you last week. People were staying away from Dak Prescott, and it's ringing true.
Yeah, I like it. But let's talk James Conner.
James Conner, you can't sleep on James Conner.
Certainly.
Even if you don't like the odds, the Cardinals are deeply, deeply underdogs. That doesn't even make sense, but you know what I'm trying to say. Yeah. Deep, they're in underdog land against the 49ers, but miracles have happened. Regardless of miracles, James Conner is bringing in points. It's not something we should overlook, and he's really affordable at 5.9K on DraftKings and 6.3K on FanDuel. He's playing 75% of the snaps. He is really low on rostership, just 4 to 5% on each platform, 19.3 average touches per week. So get in on that.
All the carries. They're not using any other running backs.
Just all the carries to him. And he was questionable, but I read that it looks like he'll play.
I'm going to ask you again because we're getting close. Week 4 is upon us. How do we feel about Kyler Murray coming back? Do you think it'll be sooner than later?
I don't know that it'll be sooner than later, but when we were saying, is he going to play? We definitely think he is going to play. We're dubbing him the new quad father these days as he's just showing off those quads. It'll be exciting. I really do think the Cardinals could have been 3-0 at this point, had we had Kyler Murray. So that's kind of the bummer part of it all. But here we are. We got one win under our belts.
No, like I said, not bad at all. Just a quick reminder, folks, you can play DFS with Austin, Kelly, myself, and a lot of other people from Club Fantasy. Links are in the description of this video and all of the DFS articles on clubfantasyffl.com. Next category, C's, get degrees. These are the punt plays of the week. These players are under 4,000. Usually when we say under 4,000, we mean on DraftKings and then the equivalent on FanDuel. Kelly, go ahead and get us started here.
Okay. Well, we share one in common, so I'll do the one that we don't have in common. And the reason I'm sharing these is the same reason we have one in common. Is that a riddle enough for you?
Yeah, no, it all makes perfect sense. One, you guys went all tight ends in this category. So clearly this is a punt tight end week. And then the one part Kelly hasn't addressed yet, it's because Sam Laporta isn't on the main slate. So she can't put him in her lineup. So she just needs to settle at this point.
That is so true. I actually have that in my other notes, but it is true because I can't play Sam Laporta this week. I have to look elsewhere. And I will say in some of my write-ups, I do have TJ Hawkinson's play in there somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, you like Kirk Cousins, so that makes sense.
Yeah, but because I have such lofty goals in my receiving room, my quarterback room, I'm going to go cheap this week. The tight ends just don't excite me. I don't really love the matchup like with Mark Andrews at the Browns. The Browns defense has been pretty tough. So I'm looking at the likes of Jake Ferguson, 3.5 on DraftKings, 5.1 on FanDuel. What I like, again, the word consistency, dependability, that keeps coming up. He's averaging 7 points per game. He's projected for 8, so that tracks. For 3.5, I'm feeling pretty great about
his average performance doubles his salary.
So it's definitely a value, especially if you've overspent. And along those same lines, you've got Pat Freiermuth, DraftKings 3,400.
100 less than Jake Ferguson.
100 less than Jake Ferguson. And I actually think he's projected for like 1 point more. I almost like the matchup a little bit better, but either of these guys will do another one of those same kind of vibes for me.
Yeah, and Austin, this tracks with what I know about you, and that is punting on tight end. And I've been reading your articles and editing your articles for ages. I know this is typically how you like to play, so I'll let you go in on a little bit on Freiermuth and your other guy.
Yeah, I mean, basically, like, I need to save money this week. I'm trying to play Christian McCaffrey. I'm trying to play Jamar Chase, and I have to get creative on how I'm saving money. So I'm definitely punting at tight end. I just also none of the like second tier tight ends have performed well enough for me to warrant paying up for them when Travis Kelce isn't in the main slate. Yeah. So I'm going with Pat Freiermuth. I'm hoping he falls into the end zone. It's been kind of a hit or miss start. Like he's gone like 4 targets, 1 target, 4 targets. So it's been a little volatile, but I think he's an important part of this offense. He's cheap enough. It's fine if he's not that great. And also, Houston has been middle of the road against tight ends. They've been great against receivers, which is weird about like what about this Houston Texans defense. But I've been saying like I think they're going to be decent. So my hope is that basically George Pickens doesn't get the work and Pat Freiermuth gets the middle of the field work. Najee Harris runs the ball down the field, and then Freiermuth falls in the end zone. Like that's what I'm looking for. The second tight end I have, this is another podcast exclusive pick, bringing you just special picks for those of you on YouTube. This is one, I got to be honest, I'm a little nervous about it, but it's Chig Okonkwo.
I said the matchup's there. The performance is not.
Exactly. The matchup's there. So he's 3,100 on DraftKings, which is part of why I love him. And he's 4,700 on FanDuel. Now, Chig Okonkwo, he was obviously a preseason favorite and darling. I mean, I think he was going at like the tight end 10, right? As for ADP, which I thought was too much. I got in on him early in the best ball season before his ADP got higher, and then I kind of got off. But the Bengals are giving up the 6th most points to tight ends, and with the teams that are not in the main slate, like that's one of the like top 5 matchups of the week, because the better matchups, a lot of them are Thursday, Sunday, and Monday night. And I'm going with the matchup there. Now, I got to be honest, I'm nervous to play this. He may not make it in my cash lineup, but I can tell a story that he could pop in cash just because he's been getting a decent amount of targets. And if he falls into the end zone, particularly, like he's hit his cash line, we're good. And we've saved a lot of salary space to pay up elsewhere.
Kelly, I'm going to ask you about Mark Andrews, and I know you have him on the sheet a little bit later. I spent a lot of time talking about this on our show last night. I am terrified of the Browns defense. I have never seen a team that is giving up bottom 2 points to quarterbacks and the least amount of points to every other position in fantasy. And they have only given up 26 total yards to tight ends this entire season. Your prop bet goes for touchdowns, and we're going to talk more about that in just a few seconds. But is Mandrews just a hard avoid in DFS this week, cash or GPP play?
Yeah. I don't have him anywhere in my research, and that breaks my heart because he is my boyfriend. But yeah, I just don't see it being a super productive week for Mark Andrews. I do have him listed for a prop later, and it's just because it seems so spicy. Why pass it up? Yeah. But yeah, I would not put him in my DFS lineups this week, and it's exactly for the reason that you said. It's that Browns defense. Now the Browns offense, on the other hand, happens to be very volatile. That's a whole different story, but defense wise, I'm not into it.
Perfect. I thought so. And that brings us to the prop quiz section. And this is brought to you by BetStamp. BetStamp funnels all of your betting and DFS into one singular place to help you get the best bang for your bets. You can use the link in the description of this video to see what sportsbooks are available where you play. And they're going to help you get the deposit matches at any of the sites you decide to start signing up with. You can start making money in no time, and it's even going to help you with prop bets, which is what this entire section is about. Austin, killing it, profiting like crazy this season. You got another 6 picks for us tonight. Go into it, man.
Yeah. So last week we went 5 of 6. So I am 70% on the year. I'm honestly expecting that to come down because that is a wild hit rate. So, take that for what you will. And I was going to give 5 tonight because I got to 20 total picks given on the year. And I was like, oh, it'd be nice to stay on some round numbers.
On 5 now.
But then the Joe Burrow line finally dropped on Underdog Fantasy, and I rushed to put in another parlay before this show because his line is starting at they haven't released his line until Thursday, which is weird for Underdog to wait that long. And when they did, they released it at 263.5 yards. I already said that the Tennessee Titans have averaged 300 yards to opposing quarterbacks, including Derek Carr and CJ Stroud, right? Like they're giving up yards. So I'm taking the over on Joe Burrow, and I wouldn't be shocked if by the time this show drops that line has already moved up a few yards. Obviously, if I'm taking the Joe Burrow over, I'm also taking the Jamar Chase over 81.5 yards. I really like that line this week. Other players, these are some that we mentioned in the show. Adam Thielen over 51.5 receiving yards. I think that's a great pick given that matchup this week. Christian Kirk over 51.5 yards. I watched the Atlanta Falcons game last week, and they could not defend the middle of the field. It was the most infuriating thing watching Sam Laporta get a bunch of over routes and just going for tons of yards. Also, Christian Kirk is not the number one, and for whatever reason, the Falcons think it's a great idea to have Trey Flowers out there lining up and man-to-man and giving up a shit ton of yards. I do not love it, and so I think Christian Kirk is going to be doing just fine against my Falcons. Next, I got George Pickens under 56.5 yards. This one has already come down from 59.5 yards. It's the Houston Texans cornerback room. They're secondary. They're doing pretty well against receivers, and I think they're going to focus on making sure Pickens is not eating them alive. They'll probably give up a deep pass interference at some time because I think that's how they give up some of their points is they're like, I'm not giving up the yards. I'll give up the pass interference. And then, the running back can fall into the end zone. And the last one I have is Jamar Chase under 70.5 rushing yards going against the New England Patriots. I think this Patriots defense finally woke up and was like, yeah, we should not get run all over all season long.
Fix you here, Tony Pollard. And I wanted to talk, you said Jamar Chase, and I'm like, that's not right at all. You've already mentioned Jamar Chase. Tony Pollard under 70.5. But more importantly, I want you to talk about, and I know you want to talk about the Patriots defense. 79.5 this started at and has dropped 9 yards in 2 days.
Oh, it dropped quick. It did that the first day. It opened at 79.5, and I was like, oh, that's definitely too high. But they hadn't released enough other lines yet for me to like pick which I wanted to pair it with. And so I waited. And by the time I came back later that day, it was already at 70.5. It got down to 69.5 at one point and then got back up. So this line has been a little funky, but I'm definitely taking the under. He might get some receiving yards and like he can still fall in the end zone and do well. But I think that the Patriots are doing a better job against the run now. And that's what we should see going forward. So I'm taking the under on his rushing yard line.
Perfect. And then Kelly usually finds us the awesome bets over on DraftKings and things like that. So Kelly, go ahead and talk about your bets this week.
Yes, a few fun ones this week. I had to. The Kelsey and Swift love combo on DraftKings.
The single greatest thing happening in fantasy football right now.
It really is. I don't know that I'll get sick of it, to be honest.
I won't. I'll tell you right now. First of all, unashamed Swiftie. I love everything she puts out, except for Karma. Hated that song right from the start. All the rest I really enjoy. But anyway, yes,
that is a take. We could zero the show hardcore right now.
But anyway, Swift Kelsey, everyone on this show is here for it. Keep going, Kelly.
Swift Kelsey, 200 plus combined yards. Combined yards. I think that's a no-brainer. That's giving you odds right now of plus 175. So there's a little play. If you're new to props and just want to do something fun, I like that one. Another spicier DraftKings parlay. We've got a 1, 2, 3, 4 leg parlay at plus 685. We're looking at Justin Jefferson for over 100 yards. Olave over 75 yards, Nakua over 50 yards, Bijan Robinson over 25 yards. All receiving yards, by the way.
Okay, I was going to say, I love how low Bijan's is, but receiving makes it make a lot more sense. So.
All receiving yards, and I feel like that's fun. That's doable. We did not mention Olave tonight, but that's another DFS pick that I really like the matchup and all of the dollars and all of the cents on that one. So I like that parlay. Lastly, underdog. In your notes, is this iPhone only? Is that the spicy play? Is that on iPhone only?
Yes. They have not released it on Android yet.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Well, spicy play, if you're on an iPhone, you get like this little chili pepper next to some of the plays, and they pay more than one time. So there's Mark Andrews.
This is on Underdog?
Yeah.
I've never seen this before on Android.
I never had either. That's why I wanted to talk about it.
Okay.
If Mark Andrews, and there's the same play for Zay Flowers, if they score a touchdown, because it's at 0.5. If they score a touchdown, receiving or rushing, falling in, tumbling, flying, jumping, however they get in there, Mark Andrews will pay off at 1.75 times. If Zay Flowers gets in the end zone, it's paying off at 1.5 times. So I'm like, yeah.
Walk me through this though. So does it need to be a part of a pick'em and then you just get your buy-in back? Like, I don't understand how this works.
They have so you can do the over under yards still.
Oh, I understand.
Yeah.
My bad.
You can still do like, they don't call it over under though. They call it higher lower.
Yeah.
So you can do the higher lower picks, but then they have like these spicy ones that are like, do you like it or not? And I'm like, yeah, I do.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, that's definitely new and one to look into. And like I said, while we can hate Mark Andrews, it's not that hard for him to score a singular touchdown.
Touchdown. And if he does, you win more than your one time. And if he doesn't, then hopefully you didn't put too much in and it was fun.
There you go. All right, guys, we are getting towards the end of the show. This is the Valedictorian Shootout. Kelly, you basically called your shot that you felt way better. You were taking it way more seriously, and you pull out a 15-point win last week. You will get the honor of announcing your roster first. Remember, we are using DraftKings scoring. Austin is up 2-1 on the season right now.
Okay, here we go. I did cram them all in. Are you ready for this?
I am.
Justin Herbert, Davante Adams, Keenan Allen, James Conner, Zach Moss. I got me some Palmer action in there.
Who is that? Oh, Josh Palmer. Gotcha.
Freiermuth. Muth is Luth. I'm throwing in a very fun flex. Highest receiver on the Cardinals, Michael Wilson.
Ooh.
And
he did well last week, didn't he?
He did, and he's killing it actually. And then the Ravens defense. We're gonna go with the Ravens defense. I think that Browns offense is not quite there.
I love that you got Allen and Davante into your lineup, which is something we talked about doing earlier in the show. Austin, you're up. What's your lineup this week, man?
Yeah, so first off at quarterback, I have Joe Burrow at 6,500. You could have seen this coming. I'm all in on him this week. With my running backs, I have 3 running backs. First off, Christian McCaffrey at 9,200. This is where I was going to talk about the Arizona Cardinals because I love that matchup. Also makes me interested in Elijah Mitchell in tournaments. Just side note, in case he gets like fourth quarter action and just keeps running. But that's another story. Yeah. I have DeAndre Swift in at 5,700, and then the boy that everyone loves to hate now, Najee Harris, $5,500.
I was gonna say you lightly touched on him earlier, and I didn't know if this was gonna become a pick for you.
So. Yeah, I'm a fan of him. I mean, it's a great matchup against Houston. They've been giving up a ton of points to running backs, so it is also possible that both Najee and Jaylen Warren hit. At receiver, I have Jamar Chase at $7,800, Adam Thielen at $4,500, and Josh Palmer at $4K. My tight end spot, I also went with the Pat Freiermuth at $3,400, and then we also have the same defense, Baltimore Ravens.
Look at you guys,
at $3,200.
And so I'll use this as an example of this is what cash is all about. You're going to see very similar plays because you want the slow and steady, but they swung for the fences at different positions. Austin's doing it at running back. Kelly's doing it at wide receiver. So I think this is going to be a very interesting lineup. This is just a nice little fun battle we do between these guys. This might not be the lineups they play against you. And that's right. Just your final reminder, you can play with us. What's that, Kelly?
I said, yes, it is.
Or it will be the exact lineup and you know how to avoid losing to Kelly. Last week, Joel Worth from Club Fantasy took down not one, but both contests. And if you're an old school wrestling fan, much respect to Joel's DraftKings name. It is Y2 Jolico, which is a play on Chris Jericho from WWE. I noticed it right away, and he says not many people get it. I was thoroughly impressed. But Joel took down both contests, 205 points in the DraftKings contest. Still not enough to win $1 million, as Austin pointed out, but a very high score, and 160 points in the FanDuel contest. Congratulations to our Joel Worth. What a wonderful show. I hope you guys learned something. You're going to find a ton of content at clubfantasyffl.com. Austin's going to drop an article tomorrow on DFS. Kelly's going to drop a recap of this show on DFS. Austin, if you want to talk a little bit about your article, about what it's about, and Kelly, I want you to talk about the stuff you put out even other places, because I want these people to be able to get all of the great DFS knowledge that you guys are putting out for everybody. Austin, go ahead.
Yeah, so I tease it all throughout the show. I give out players that I don't give out on this show. Whenever you get my cash article every week, I have 14 players that I put in that lineup. It gives you a solid player pool so you can pick your 9 favorite players from that article. I give you enough so you don't have to just trust me, but you could trust yourself a little bit, but also you could just use my article as your only reference and it's good to go. You get 2 quarterbacks, 4 receivers, 4 running backs, 2 tight ends, and 2 defenses. So there's plenty of directions to go. And sometimes I sprinkle in some DFS strategy in the intro. So don't scroll to the players. Like there's some good nuggets in that intro piece as well.
And Kelly, where can they find your content?
Well, I just do a simple recap, really. We just started doing it last
Which
week.
is awesome.
It's been on the list.
Yeah.
So if you've listened, you've forgotten what we've talked about, you can go check out the recap. You can even rewatch the show because I embedded it in there. You can join our contests. I'm also writing over at Player Profiler. Many of the picks that I shared with you tonight, I would say 90% of them are in my Player Profiler article, but I give a lot of the details. So if you want to hop over there and check that out, the best way to find out what I'm doing, what I'm betting, what I'm sharing is just to follow me on that app formerly known as Twitter at Kelly and Phoenix. I want to tell Austin, I think the Cardinals are going to have it in for McCaffrey. I feel like that's a touchdown waiting to happen.
Spicy. You think this is the first time in 12 games he doesn't score a touchdown, Kelly? Are you willing to go that far on the show today?
I don't know that I'm willing to go that far, but I don't see it being like a 30-plus point fantasy game for McCaffrey. I think they're going to be very strategic in how they let him play.
I like
Can
it.
it be 25 points?
I hope everybody enjoyed the show. You can follow Kelly at Kelly in Phoenix. You can follow Austin at Austin_FFL. You can follow Club Fantasy on all of the socials at Club Fantasy FFL. You can go ahead and hit subscribe on the YouTube video right now. As I say every week, it costs you nothing, but it means the world to us. And did fantasy football treat you like the Denver Broncos last week? Did it just beat you down and nothing went right for you? DFS is still here for you. Just create a new lineup. We'll see you at next week's lesson.